Hello, and welcome to the Good Girls Get Rich podcast. I'm your host, Karen Yankovich, and I really love this week's topic because it is something I think so many of us don't think about. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to use LinkedIn to land more speaking engagements. And, if you are an entrepreneur or building your thought leader brand, whatever that looks like for you, right? Maybe you're looking to whatever your next, if you're looking at your next chapter, looking differently than this chapter, then one of the fastest ways to start to build your thought leader brand is to have a microphone in your hand. And it doesn't necessarily have to be standing on a big stage. It could be virtual. It could be local, right? Local chambers of commerce, local women's groups, local, whatever kind of organizations that would feed your business, right? It has an audience full of people that will feed your business. And, it immediately elevates you when you're the one that's the speaker, right? It immediately elevates you energetically. It elevates your personal branding, right? Because now you are a speaker or a keynote speaker, and it expands your influence, right? A lot of people say to me, because I one of the things that I teach is you don't really need to have a ton of LinkedIn connections, but I happen to have a lot. But I have a lot because I speak a lot, and most of the people then at the conference connect with me, right? So it expands my influence every time I'm in front of an audience. And we're going to talk a little bit here. There's like two sides to this, right? There's as most of I don't have it here with me, but and if you've ever seen our She's Linked Up logo, then you will probably notice that it's a little yin yangy, right? And the reason we do that is because I believe that in order to kind of have the success that I know is there for you as you're stepping into your next chapter, as you're building your brand as a thought leader, there's strategy, right? There's the strategy stuff, but there's also the mindset. And all the strategy, all the ambition in the world isn't going to get you there if your energy isn't aligned with your ambition, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So there's a little bit of a dual approach to what I'm going to teach you here today on this podcast. And this is definitely a teaching one. So you're going to want to listen to this again or take notes, or I've got show notes here, so you probably don't even need to take notes. You can always just refer back to a lot of this stuff. And, so what we're going to be talking about here is how to use LinkedIn to land those speaking engagements. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to do that. I use LinkedIn frequently to land more speaking engagements. I'm going to show you how I do that. So let's dive in and explore a little bit about why I think speaking is such a powerful tool for your brand and your business. So let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, right? Are you getting paid to speak? Initially, probably no. Initially, you're probably going to speak and sometimes you even have to pay for your ticket, right? Like sometimes not only are they not paying you, you're paying for the pleasure of being on their stage, right? But there's a way to monetize that. That's not what we're going into here today. We talk a lot about that in our She's Linked Up programs, but there's definitely ways to monetize that. But I can tell you this, the vast majority, I'm going to say maybe more than 90%, of the paid speaking engagements I've had where I get paid $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, whatever to speak at an event, have come from somebody seeing me on stage already. So the best way to quickly get paid speaking engagements is to get out there and speak, okay? Even if it's for free, even if you have to pay to be on that stage. And I'm not really talking about like being a sponsor. I'm not talking about pro or cons of that here right now. There's definitely pros and cons to that. I'm talking about like, even if you have to pay for your ticket or pay for your flight or pay for a hotel room, right? If it's going to cost you money to be there, it's okay because there's ways to monetize that, but that is how you're going to get more speaking engagements, right? So it leads to more media features. It leads to more podcast guest spots. It leads to more generally more exposure for you, right? So, I've been a speaker at events, all over the world really. And often, or sometimes, right, there's local press, right, for these events, and they'll feature me or maybe even national press, right? So it definitely opens the door to more media opportunities, and all of that adds to your credibility. That's why the PR in the She's Linked Up, which is LinkedIn and PR strategies for women. the PR piece of it is there because it adds credibility as we're stepping into our new ventures, right? So every event is an opportunity to show up as an expert, not just to the audience, but to the media, to the organizers, right? To the other speakers, right? You're surrounding yourself with other people that are looking at you as a thought leader. So what do you need to do first? Ding, 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 ding. Your LinkedIn profile, right? You've got to take a look at your LinkedIn profile with an eye to, is it setting you up for speaking engagements? Do you even have like keynote speaker? I can tell you, my speaker agent was reached out to me a couple years ago, and she's like, "Do you know that you don't have keynote speaker on your LinkedIn profile as a skill?" I was like, "I don't." She's like, "You don't." I'm like, "Okay, that's changing, right?" So of course that's changed. So I've changed that and I added that, right? So sometimes you might even need another set of eyes on it, right? Like certainly you can join us in our free Facebook group, LinkedInforWomenCommunity.com, where we review profiles frequently in that group. And I can, if you can say to me, take a look at this, what am I missing if I want to get keynote talks, right? But you need to have a LinkedIn headline and a LinkedIn about section that immediately positions you as a speaker, right? Include like power words like keynote speaker, industry expert, thought leader, like what are you talking about in there, right? In your experience section, you may want to have a section that talks about you as a keynote speaker, as a speaker. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, there's a section there that talks about that in my experience section. And that's where I have some one sheets, like speaker one sheets for different kinds of talks that I do. They're listed there as media, right? So even if it's small or virtual, you want to put some of that in your experience section because that's how you start to show up as a thought leader. People don't want to be the first place you've ever talked, even though that's going to happen, right? They don't need to know that they're the first place. Volunteer, get out there, talk to in front of, like, again, your local chamber of commerce or places that they're an easy yes. And then you start to leverage that, right? Your featured section. If keynote speaking or speaking is a big part of your next chapter, then you might want to put, like if you have a speaker reel or a speaker one sheet, you may want to put that in your featured section on LinkedIn, right? If you are speaking at events, and this is a tip I don't want you to forget. I want you to put this in your brain and leave it there, okay? If you have to forget something to make room for it, then forget something because I want you to make room for this. When you do speak at an event, I want you to ask them for a LinkedIn recommendation. Okay, you can guide them a little bit how to what you want. Like you can say like, hey, if they say this was great, I love the work that you did. Then say, that's so nice. I'm so happy that you were happy with this. How would you feel about writing that as a LinkedIn recommendation for me? Because that would be really helpful to me. Because what this is doing, what these initial engagements are doing, or even if you've been speaking forever and you're starting to do this stuff that I'm talking about here now, it starts that positioning. Right? It starts that positioning because when you optimize your LinkedIn profile for speaking engagements, you are also feeding it these keywords, right? And you may have heard me say this before, but I can put LinkedIn speaker, LinkedIn keynote speaker, blah, 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 all of my LinkedIn profile. But guess what? All of my competition knows how to do that. So if somebody goes into LinkedIn looking for a LinkedIn keynote speaker, I am probably going to be one of a lot of profiles that come up. But your competition probably doesn't know this, right? So if you are a money mindset for real estate agents coach, right? And maybe a real estate conference is looking for a money mindset and you've got those words sprinkled in your profile, you are going to come up number one. So when they get to your profile, now you want to grab them. That's why you want to have some of this in your experience section, in your headline, in your about section. So yes, we want keywords in there, but we also want to make sure the profile positions us as worthy of their time so that they reach out to us, right? It's amazing when you come up, but we want them to actually reach out to you, right? Like my goal is not for you to have more visibility. I mean, listen, I want you to have more visibility, but the end goal is to have more calls on your calendar, right? And that comes from a profile that will convert them to wanting to book a call with you. Does that make sense? So again, even if you don't have really formal and speaking experience yet, start volunteering, position your existing content or thought leadership as speaking topics, right? In your LinkedIn summary, start building that authority in your LinkedIn profile. And then what do you need to do? Now you got to start networking. So you're starting to build a network full of people that are, that could lead to you landing more speaking engagements. One of the ways you can do this is you can research events in advance. And guess what? We can use AI to do this now, right? We can go into ChatGPT and say, list conferences, 2025 conferences in this industry, in this geographic area, that are looking for speakers, and go into Gemini, maybe, because that's connected with Google. Maybe that'll do that. Start doing some research, right? Now what you want to do is you want to look to see who the organizers are, who books the speaking gigs, who are the speakers that are there now, right? So let's take this one piece at a time. First thing I want you to do is see if you can find who books the speakers. Is there something that says, speaking inquiries go to Mary at, abccompany.com, right? Is there a speaker application? Right? When is the conference? Like, I like to say, like, probably 6 to 9 months before the conference is when the application will go out. Could be earlier, it could be a tighter timeline, but you want to look as far out as 6 to 9 months before the conference. So if you see a conference that maybe is happening now, this episode's going out, I think, in October or November 2024, this is conference season, right? So there's a lot of conferences happening right now. So you might not be able to get in for this year, but you may be able to get in for next year, right? So you want to start to have a follow-up, maybe have a spreadsheet. We use Asana around here for those kinds of things, right? So you want to start to connect with them. And I can tell you that I have done this very successfully. I can think of a conference that I identified. They have an entire track for women in finance. So I was like, wow, I want to speak at that. It was too late for the conference that they were doing on the West Coast, but they were having an East Coast conference. So I was like, well, I live right outside of New York City. So I just connected with the person that booked the speakers. Easy to find that out from their website on LinkedIn. And they didn't seem to be using LinkedIn all that much, but it's okay. I connected anyway and just said, I've been following the work you're doing and the conferences you're doing for this organization, and I'd love to be connected. P.S. I'm right outside of New York City. I'd love to talk about your East Coast conference that's coming up. And she accepted my connection request and didn't say anything to me. And then I reached out a month or two later, and she's like, you know what? Reach out to me in this month, and let's talk, because we are going to be looking for speakers, and this is when we're going to be looking. Well, I dropped the ball. Like, at the end of the day, I dropped the ball on that. I didn't get back to her. By the time I saw it, it was too late. I reached back out to her and said, oh my gosh, I completely forgot. And remember, this woman did not know me, right? All she knew of me was what was on my profile. Nobody introduced me to her, right? And I reached out to her, and she's like, oh, all of our speaker slots are full. I'm so sorry, but let's stay connected for next year. 2 days later, I get a message from her and says, you know what? I think I could put you on a panel. Yes, I will take that panel, right? I will take that panel. So do you understand what I'm saying? So you want to be connecting with these people, and just in the framework that we teach, and she's linked up, in the framework that we've talked about a lot in this, in this podcast. I don't want you to be just spamming people. I want you to build actual relationships with people. Be of value. If you're following along with the conference, maybe you see some posts, you can tag them and say, wow, look at this, was a great event. Like, share it, right? Share posts that they're sharing so that, be of value. You're probably not looking to speak on stages 10 times a month, at least not initially. So if you've got like 5 to 10 conferences in the next 12 months, can you do this times 20? Maybe if you're doing this times 20 conferences, it's not that hard to do. It's not that much work. Using Sales Navigator, you can identify them in a list there. So there's ways to do this. So the first thing you want to do is research these events and start to connect with the organizers. The next thing you want to do is you want to look at the speakers at those events that you've identified, and you want to look to see who are the speakers that probably align with what you talk about. Right? If, like, for this finance conference, obviously it wasn't all about marketing, right? It was about a lot of different things. But I made sure that I was connected to all of the speakers at that conference that talked about marketing, because you know why? I wanted to see where else they were speaking. Right? So you don't even really have to connect with them on LinkedIn. You could just follow them, and then you could ring their bell, right? So that you get notified of their content. And now anytime they post a post like, hey, just, they posted a picture of them standing on a stage at a conference. Now these are more leads for you, right? These are like networking strategies, research strategies. And by the way, it doesn't have to be you doing this. You can have these are things your VA can do, right? Or your assistant can do, right? They can feed you these opportunities when they come across them, but your assistant can be doing some of this research into the speakers that are on these topics at the kind of events you want to be speaking at, that can be opportunities for you to now identify this. Because like for me, for example, I'm always looking to speak at events that focus on women, but there's like women in trucking in the Midwest on mountains. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a million women's conferences. I can't, like, there's no way for me to find them all. You can Google for them, but it's hard to find out. It's hard to find that. So, and again, we use it, we can use AI to do some of that research too. But if you have an assistant that can do some of this work, or maybe even go into, Fiverr or Upwork or something and have somebody do some of this research for you, that's just one way you can do this, because you want to be networking and you want to do it intentionally. Here's something that's also really, really important. You want to be sure that you are only in front of an audience of people that potentially are your clients. Because what happens is, like in my example, in my experience, there are definitely conferences that are maybe 50-50, maybe even 25-75. Like I only think a small subsect of that conference might be a good audience for me, but I might still choose to speak to it anyway. But I do it intentionally, right? There would be a reason for me to do that. I did an event a couple of years ago, and it was a virtual event, and it was pushed out across the country to all of these newspapers. There was like, I think, 4,000 people at this event. I was swamped from people that were never going to buy anything from me, right? So would I do it? It was a lot of fun, but would I do it again? I don't know, because I am not AT&T, right? Like I don't have the kind of staff that can support that kind of an influx of crap leads. This is one of the reasons why I don't like AI tools to be spinning for leads for you. I want calls on your calendar, but I want them to be very intentionally researched. So you're not wasting a lot of time getting on the phone with people that are never going to buy anything from you, right? So you want to be sure that the audience is people that potentially are your ideal clients. You're going to get this wrong on occasion, and that's okay. And have I done talks in front of audiences that are not my ideal clients? Absolutely. Those are the ones I want to get paid for. Right? Those are the ones I will only speak in front of those audiences if somebody pays me. If you want to know about LinkedIn and PR strategies, and it's whatever the opportunity, whatever the room is, if I don't think that my ideal clients are there, I will do it, but you got to pay me, right? Does that make sense? So you want to be proactively networking with these people, proactively networking with conference organizers, proactively networking with other speakers at some of these things. Build some rapport, right? Comment on their posts, share their content, connect thoughtfully, use their hashtags if you're talking about their conference, right? So it's still kind of cold outreach, because, and I don't really stand for cold outreach, but it's cold outreach with like warm intentions, right? You are reaching out, but you're saying, I saw that you're speaking at this event. I've been following this conference. It looks amazing. How was it? Right? So you can use that. Now, remember, once you start to connect with them, now, your LinkedIn strategy system kicks in, and they'll see occasionally that you're posting. For example, if you are speaking at your local chamber or other local events, you're going to post pictures of that on LinkedIn. You're going to post pictures of yourself with a microphone, right? So, my header image default often is just a picture of me with a microphone on LinkedIn, because it tells the story without me telling the story, right? Does that make sense? So these are some of the ways that you can easily do that. You also want to leverage your media mentions, right? Because now, as you're starting to connect with these people, right, on LinkedIn, and you're starting to build this, and remember, this is, if you are looking to be a professional speaker and you want to make $50,000 or $100,000 a month speaking, this is not what I'm talking about here. Can I help you with that? Absolutely. I'm talking about somebody that's using speaking to get more visibility, to build their business, right? To build their email list, to get more clients. So you're probably maybe looking at getting, if you really want a solid speaking career, maybe you're looking to get one a month, right? So that's 12 for the year. So, this is not going to take a lot of your time. I just want you to be intentional with it, right? And then once you've done this research and you've done this and you're connecting with people, now you want to stay engaged with them. And this is why I like Sales Navigator, because it allows you to create these lists that you can see what they're posting, or even if you just ring their bell so that you see what they're posting. But you might kind of forget, right? Like there might be somebody you're connected to that, let's say it's a coach that does something similar that you're doing, right? If they're on a Sales Navigator list that says speakers from events I want to speak at, you're going to remember why you're following them and why you want to share their content and why you're keeping an eye on what they're doing. If it's just somebody you followed, and then it's just going to be, they're going to blend in with all your other LinkedIn connections, right? Make sense? So as you start to get media opportunities, which again, in our She's Linked Up framework, that's a big part of what we teach. It's, we're not asking you to get a $10,000 a month publicist, right? We're teaching you how to do this again, with ease, with simple strategies. Don't take a lot of time every week or every month. You want to start leveraging that and showcasing that. All of these things are starting to position you as a thought leader, as worthy of somebody that's on the stage, right? So cross-promote any events that you're going to be doing, right? Connect with all of the other speakers. Really use LinkedIn to show a lot of visibility. If you go to events, take pictures of the speakers, take pictures with the speakers, use the conference hashtag. Really immerse yourself in the culture of the kinds of events you want to speak at, because I think it's really going to help you do this. I want to remind you too that this does not just have to be in person. It could be virtual. I remember I was booked to speak at a virtual event, and it was a live event, and it turned out I wasn't going to be able to make it. So I knew the organizers. I called the organizers. I'm like, I am so sorry, but I can't be there live. And she said, I said, I'm going to be in the car or something. Like, it wasn't like I was going to be, I couldn't be live doing it. So what we ended up deciding to do was pre-record the presentation and just have me live in the comments, right? Which I was able to just, I got my like trusty iPad here, I was easily able to just jump into the comments and be a part of the conversation. And we announced it right at the beginning. This is what the entrepreneur life is like, right? Like, I've committed to this thing came up that I couldn't reschedule it. And it almost never happens. Like, it's certainly not something I want to make a habit of, but it worked out great. I actually got some real business from that conference, right? So there's ways to do this stuff. It doesn't have to be the traditional way. I want you to think outside the box. While I really do love in-person speaking opportunities, and if you have any, by the way, reach out to me. info@KarenYankovich.com is the best way to get to somebody that can help you with that. Or KarenYankovich.com/speaking. Anyway, I love your referrals on that. And then we get to meet and hang out. Wouldn't that be fun? But you want to leverage this stuff. You want to talk about all of these things. So many people say to me, I don't know what to post. I don't want to post content. And they make up all this crazy garbage that they post about on LinkedIn. People want to see you, right? People on LinkedIn want to see you. They want to see what you're up to. And they don't, if you want to post what you had for lunch, go ahead. But if you're posting that I'm speaking at this event, you take a screenshot of the Zoom and you tag some of the other speakers in there or some of the other attendees in there. That's the kind of content LinkedIn loves, and it's going to push out and get you more engagement on LinkedIn, right? So this is ways to broaden this, right? So whether it's a small event, it could be a tiny little niche event or a large industry conference. The approach is the same, right? Build relationships, provide value, showcase your expertise. I remember another opportunity where there was somebody that asked me to speak to her group, and it was virtual, and I ended up having to do all the work, and I wasn't really happy with that. I had to create the sales page, I had to create the registrations, and I really didn't want to do that, frankly, but I did. And they weren't paying me, right? Like, normally if you ask me to speak in front of your group, you're doing all of that, and I'm just showing up. But I did it. I don't remember why I did it. I did it. And there was like maybe 8 people there. I think 2 or 3 of those 8 people signed up for one of my programs. I do not you just never know. Go with your gut. If you feel like it's a good audience, do it. Okay. And then, ongoing engagement with these people to stay on their radar. Hopefully this makes sense to you. Hopefully you're starting to see how this can make sense. So a couple of important points here. Your LinkedIn profile, right? Do some research, be really specific about the people that you're reaching out to, because you want to make sure the audiences are perfectly aligned with your ideal perfect client, right? And then you want to just stay engaged with these people. Keep track of it, whether it's a Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet or Asana or something like that. Keep track of it. You're not doing this times 100. You're doing this times a few, right? And if you're listening to this in the fall of 2024, when this is going live, it doesn't really matter when you're listening to this, but if you're listening to it in the fall, this is conference season. So keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open and pay attention to what you're seeing other people in your industry post. Are there conferences they're speaking at? And by the way, one last little tip about that. While it is definitely too late to get on the formal roster for most of the events, if it's a month away, especially if it's a bigger conference, it doesn't hurt when you connect with the organizer to say, you know what, I'm only a half hour away from you. If you end up with somebody pulling out and you need a last minute fill in, feel free to reach out to me. If I can do it, I'm happy to help you, right? Doesn't hurt to say that, right? You never know. You never know when you'll get an opportunity, when you get an opportunity like that. Okay, so as we wrap this up, there's a few things I want to talk about. I mentioned earlier in the show that if you've got an opportunity for me to be speaking on your stage, I would love to chat with you about that because I love to meet my listeners in person. I feel like I'm talking at you a lot, right? And I love to have an opportunity to talk with you. So at the same time, if you're speaking at an event, before the event starts, start inviting your network. Right? Invite your network to the event. The conference organizers love it because they show up and they say, hey, where's Karen Yankovich? I'm here because she invited me here, right? Sometimes as a speaker, you get some free passes. You can even give out some free passes. The deep engagement with your audience, that's what we stand for here, right? So on that same note, if you are going to be free in January of 2025, want to come to Orlando, I'm going to be speaking at Podfest Multimedia Expo. Podfestexpo.com is the link. I'd love to see you there, right? It's a podcast conference, so it feeds into all the things I love, right? Because I want you to get more podcast interviews. We've talked about that a lot on the show, and you can certainly do that at a podcast conference. But if you have a podcast or a YouTube show or any kind of regular content that you show up for, this conference is amazing, and we get to hang out, right? I will probably do, I'll probably do some kind of meetup or something, but for sure, go, DM me on LinkedIn if you want to know more about the link to register for that. Okay. And then remember too, that in our She's Linked Up program, this is what we teach. This is what we teach. In fact, this episode is prompted by a 2-hour masterclass I did on this topic in our mastermind, in our She's Linked Up Society Scale Up Mastermind, because I was like, this is such a good topic. I want to do this on my podcast as well, right? But we went deep, and it's actually going to end up being a second part. There's going to be a second part to this in our mastermind. So maybe there'll be a second part to this too. Who knows? But I want to go deep with you. I want you to know exactly how to land these opportunities and to get them, because the end game is to profit off of every single one of them. You've heard me say this before. I want there to be more wealthy women in the world, right? So it isn't just about having a microphone in the hand. Yes, I want you to have the credibility. Yes, I want you to have the visibility. But most importantly, I want you to have the profitability, right? So each one of these events will lead to more profits. For example, in the Podfest Expo event that I'm going to be speaking at, I'm actually bringing my community there. Some of my She's Linked Up students, I'm hoping a lot of them will be there. But we're going to have at no additional charge to them. I'm going to be there for them to support them in their efforts to be at that event as an attendee and monetize it and land podcast guest spots, and also get some real good juicy good strategies for their own content so that they are continuing to build their wealth, right? So we're there for that. And here's what happens then. Again, a little behind the scenes. What happens if my students are roaming around this conference, right? If you're there as a podcast listener and you're hearing them and we meet, I don't know, maybe you'll decide you want to be a part of our ecosystem, right? Doesn't that feel better than all of this outbound spammy garbage that you're seeing out there in sales? Maybe you're even having a difficult 2024 financially because it has been a weird year for coaches. We've talked about that on the show. This is how we're landing business. This is how people are landing business, with those deep connections, right? So when you're a speaker, you want to invite your audience there. The conference organizers love that you're bringing people there. The people that show up there that you've invited, they are people that really want to stay connected to you and maybe eventually will be a part of your ecosystem, right? So just a bunch of little tips there. So if you want to know what it looks like to get some support with all of this work, the best way to do that is to get on our calendar. Go to KarenYankovich.com/call. I'd love to talk to you. Okay, so as we wrap this, you've got some homework to do, you've got some research to do. If you loved this episode, I would love for you to share this on your social media. Tag me. I'm at Karen Yankovich across all social media. Use the hashtag. She's linked up, and or Good Girls Get Rich, and we'll get to see it because then I'll share it with my audience. Because what did I talk about? That deep connection. I want to support you. I want to get your content in front of my audience. If you're supporting me by sharing this with your audience, I am surely going to, if I can see it, if you tag me, I'll make sure that I share it with my audience so I can give that favor back to you. Right, that rising tide that lifts all boats. All right. I hope this was valuable. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Good Girls Get Rich podcast.